Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. My name is Jaylene, and I will be your host today. We're thrilled to have you join us for this month's methodology breakdown, and today we have the privilege of having some special guests from CarbonBase. Our guests will explain how and why they digitize the gold standards technologies and practices to displace decentralized thermal energy consumption, also known as TPDD tech version 3. Before we begin today, I'd like to share some information about The Guardian for any new viewers who might be interested in learning a bit more about the product. So as you may know, in the carbon or GHG emissions world, the process of designing and collecting the supporting data for carbon claims is heavily manual and prone to errors. This can be due to a variety of factors, including poor data quality, a lack of assurance, potential double counting, greenwashing, and just an overall lack of trust. The Guardian is here to address these issues by leveraging a cutting-edge policy workflow engine. The Guardian can mirror the standards and business requirements of regulatory bodies, creating extremely flexible digital methodologies, also known as DMRV. This approach not only helps organizations ensure compliance with regulatory requirements, but it also enables them to streamline their carbon accounting processes, improve data quality, and reduce the risk of errors and inaccuracies. So you could think of a policy inside of The Guardian as a digital version of a methodology, and by using the policy workflow blocks like Legos, you could design your desired workflow. And you could see an example of this to your right here. CarbonBase will also be demonstrating what their policy looks like and what these workflows are organized as. So moving into this next slide. In the center of our system are four main technologies that help us provide trustworthy and clear solutions for the environmental market. So we use decentralized identifiers, also known as DIDs. These are unique identifiers that let individuals and groups create their own IDs using systems that they trust. DIDs ensure that environmental credits go to the right parties and can't be duplicated or tampered with. We also use verifiable credentials, VCs. These are digital documents that give information about the subject, who issued it, the type of credential, any specific details about the subject, and proof of how the credential was obtained. VCs make sure that the environmental credits are given only to those who meet the necessary requirements and that the credits are valid and trustworthy. And lastly, we use verifiable presentations, also known as VPs, and these are a group of one or more VCs, which you could see here to the right. We also have our trust chain at the very bottom, which is the collection of VCs indicating who was the actor, what action was taken, all the way till the end when we mint those tokens. And now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming our esteemed guests from CarbonBase, and we thank you for being here. The floor is yours.
I'm Tattva, and I'm actually the product lead at CarbonBase. And currently, I'm here today with one of our software lead, the lead of software engineering, Sahar Skicha. We both will take all of you through this journey of exploring this methodology and then having a demonstration on Guardian. So we at CarbonBase, we developed Asia's first carbon registry on a blockchain, and we call that as the Global Climate Registry. And today we take this as an opportunity to go through this particular methodology called as Gold Standards TPDD TAC version 3.1, and we'll be going through a deep dive and also a demonstration of this. So the first agenda is, I'm assuming that some people directly coming from, may not be from a non-carbon or non-sustainability background. So first I will give a very briefly on the voluntary carbon market structure. And then I will try to link this with the methodology. So we'll go through the methodology, we'll go through the overview of this methodology, the scope and applicability of this methodology. Then we'll try to show you some data visualization insights that would actually tell how popular this methodology is and in which countries a lot of implementation of this methodology is done. Then we'll go through every methodology will have some baseline methodology. That is when, let's say, you're doing a project and you need to monitor certain parameters before actually the project activity takes place. We'll cover a bit on that, and then we'll go on a real world project and we'll see the monitoring strategy, the monitoring methodology for this. We'll talk about various data and parameters in the monitoring period, and at the end, we'll go to show you a lot of calculations and the real emission calculations of the greenhouse gases, and based on which the carbon credits are issued. We are going to also give you an overview of those calculations. Then my colleague will take it over from there, and he is going to show you a very typical technological representation of the policy on Guardian, and also mentioning different features we have made use of. So let's deep dive. So first thing I want to cover is how the voluntary market right now is that we have project developers, and then we have we are right now as a registry. Okay, so it means we are going to issue carbon credits. So we have these developers. So this developer would actually make use of a methodology to actually develop a carbon offset project. And that, when I say methodology, so one of the methodologies today which we are going to discuss is this gold standard version TPDD TEC version 3.1. And at the same time, these auditors, like the validators, will make sure that they follow all the standards, and this methodology will lay out all the standards to develop a carbon offset project. And so once the auditor let us know that this project developer has complied with all the standards as per the methodology, then we issue the carbon credits. And these emissions calculations, which the project developer he monitors, and the emission calculations he does, will be validated by the auditor, and those calculations will be very much corresponding to the carbon credits we are going to issue. So this is the overall market structure, and I just wanted to give an overview like how the methodology is relevant to the carbon market structure. So let's go. Let me just take this screen. Yeah. So now let's go to the methodology part. Now, 1 in 9 people right now, if you look, they lack access to safe water, and nearly 1/3 of the world's it lack access to clean cooking technologies. Many still rely on wood or fossil fuel cookstoves, contributing to future greenhouse gases emission. Hence, you see this improved cookstove projects. This is what the methodology is all about. It really talks about 14% of the voluntary carbon market, which I just discussed. Hence, we are talking today about this methodology, and it actually sets all the standards to reduce this emissions from thermal energy consumption, basically from households and non-domestic premises. For example, improved cook stoves, oven, heaters, solar cookers, biodigesters, and safe water technologies. Now, as a global climate registry, as a carbon registry, we tokenizes this carbon credit from this improved cookstove projects, and we digitize all these baseline emissions, project emissions, leakage, and all the total emission reductions. So the project developer can digitize and can fill in all of this information in our registry, and then that's how the carbon credit issue process goes on. So now, to give an overview, this actually standardizes the calculation and monitoring of this greenhouses reduction, especially for household cooking and heating. Okay, and it more importantly, it provides a framework for the developer, this specific carbon offset project developer, to quantify and verify emission reduction for potential carbon credit generation. So anybody who deals with this biomass cooking projects, household cooking projects, they have to go through this methodology, and they have to follow this standard and that would actually then get them the carbon credits they are looking for once it is getting validated by the validators or the auditors. So now, what is the scope? Right now, we can find like multiple projects like fossil fuel cook stove, improved biomass cook stove, biogas stoves, electrical stoves. So all of this actually they actually follow this particular methodology, and they need to follow. Now, it actually, in general, it applies to all the projects that reduce emission from cooking, heating, drying. In general, any continuous useful energy output, which is less than 150 kilowatt per unit, we can take this methodology into implementation. And then we need to make sure that this once you use this methodology, it also avoids double counting, and it complies with multiple regulations. So only emission reductions from are only allowed from efficiency gains when switching to fossil fuels. So this is the point you have to keep in mind. And it gives you a detailed guideline on the baseline calculation, project emission, leakage, and monitoring. All of this, which is important for the final carbon credit calculation. Okay, so now a few things you have to do. That now the project has some condition which we need to which we need to adhere to. So first thing is that it must target households that currently use a non-renewable biomass for cooking and heating, and the project must introduce technologies or practices that leads to a reduction in this consumption of this non-renewable biomass. Okay, and then the baseline scenario. So baseline scenario will go in detail, but in a nutshell, it's like before the project actually takes place. So the baseline scenario must involve the use of non-renewable biomass, and the monitoring requirements also right now, there are certain standards we need to follow. The geographical scope is nothing but it applies to any geographical location, but where non-renewable biomass is used for household energy needs. So these are the conditions we need to take, and the validators will actually look for this for the methodology while implementing this. Now, okay, now this is the most important, interesting thing. Now, gold standard has a complete database. So we did web scraping, and our data scientists and our AI experts, they extracted the database and they did some level of calculation for this credit. This one accounts to nearly 12.5 to 13% of all the gold standard project. And here you can see around 12.75. The other one is actually also earlier version of this. So overall, if you see, is nearly 26 to 27%, and that's really shows that this methodology is widely popular, and it's very standardized, and it really is very much compliance proof. However, let's talk about the annual credits. It nearly generates around $18 million credits annually, and then even the other one, it goes around 35 to 34. So that shows nearly around 42 to 45 million credits per annum. This methodology and the previous version. Okay, now which are the countries? So in our presentation, we'll take an example of a real world monitoring project from Zimbabwe, and we would show that. But overall, if you see some of these countries in the top, they are actually implementing this methodology to a larger extent. Rwanda, Uganda, and countries in those areas are actually really implementing this methodology. So this is like some insightful to think like in which areas this methodology is implemented in a wider scale. Similarly, there is some way where we want to show the different scale of the projects. For example, not a lot of larger scale projects implements this, but micro scale also implements this. And then most of them are like under energy efficiency category. So just wanted to give you, before we deep dive, we wanted to give you a bit overview on the overall distribution of this methodology based on the type of project, the scale of the project, and the reasons of the project. Okay, so let's now deep dive. Now, any methodology we work out, we have two phases. One is called the baseline methodology, and one is called the monitoring methodology. We divide this into two parts. And why I'm mentioning this is because when my teammate, he will actually present you, when a project developer, he registers the project on the registry, the first thing he has to do is he has to submit a project developer document. And that's where he needs to completely give all the details of the baseline methodology. And then that will go to the validator. You will see that later in the demonstration, but keep this in mind that in the project developer PDD document, we need to submit the baseline methodology. Okay, so what exactly is baseline methodology? So remember that this is a technique which we use to determine the emission that would occur in the absence of the project activity. So the project, once it is not yet started, in the absence of the project activity, we take the emissions data. So this provides a standardized approach to establish a reference point against which the project emission reduction can be measured. It ensures that the quantification of emission reductions is consistent, transparent, and conservative across different project types and geographical context. However, it involves key component. Now, very specific to here. So first thing is the baseline scenario. So here we need to have the use of non-renewable biomass for household cooking and heating. Similarly, we'll measure the baseline emissions. This we need to calculate from non-renewable OD biomass consumption using some equations, which I'm going to state later. Similarly, some traditional cooking devices used before the project, we need to measure their efficiency and for determining the baseline emission. So these are the things we need to monitor before in the absence of the project activity. Now, a few other things which I want to cover. One second, why it's not going. Yeah. So now we need to also monitor the fuel consumption. This requires nothing but the quantification of baseline fuel consumption, which we'll do either some control cooking test or some surveys we do typically. Then Then the emission factors, like for CO2, CH, methane, and nitrogen dioxide. So to convert fuel consumption into gas, greenhouse, we need to also keep this into, so this is like a multiplier. You multiply that with your data and then you get the final value. And then one thing you have to see is that a key aspect of the baseline methodology is determining the fraction of biomass that is non-renewable. This involves assessing the sustainability of local biomass harvesting practices. This is something we have to monitor. And also, in some cases, the methodology allows for the consideration of suppressed demand. Suppressed demand is nothing but just like a hypothetical scenario where the baseline scenario accounts for this hypothetical scenario in which basic human needs are met. So we imagine some hypothetical scenario, and then we do some, just consider that some basic human needs are met, and then we monitor certain data. So this will constitute your baseline methodology components. Okay, now there's a few things you have to do. So first thing is, I want to tell you that there is two things. One is the baseline scenario and one is the project scenario. Project scenario is like post-project. Okay, baseline scenario is the project. First thing you have to do is we have to also make sure the project boundary is fixed. Basically, the physical and geographical area where the project activity takes place and the emission sources. The carbon dioxide emission from burning this non-renewable and the methane and nitrogen dioxide emission from inefficient biomass. These things we have to also monitor. And also, if there are some additional factors we are considering, it has to be considered. Why I'm mentioning this is because the validator, when they are actually validating your report, they would actually look for all of this. Okay. Then once you have the baseline scenario, because sometimes we do some hypothetical scenarios, we need to also give a justification. Similarly, for the project scenario, we need to give some justification. And let's say later we are doing some changes. We need to also account for that. And then we do all these calculations. Okay. And then one thing is there are certain data which is always constant. We don't need to monitor it. We also need to report that during our baseline methodology when it's taking place. Okay, now next comes the monitoring methodology. Monitoring methodology is nothing but when the project once the activity is happening, we are going to monitor certain data. This is nothing but it will ensure accurate, consistent, and verifiable measurement of your reduction from projects. And then the key objective is just to make sure that we provide credible and transparent evidence of the project impact on this carbon dioxide, the greenhouse gases emission. Now, this will help us to identify any issues or deviation in the project performance. Now, this happens that even during the monitoring period, the validators will go on site and they'll try to monitor all of this peer data. And that then based on that, they are going to finally give the registry recommendation that how much credits are going to be issued to you. So monitoring methodology is probably one of the very crucial component. And my colleague Harsh will show you, we need to submit after your project development document, that is the baseline part is valid, you passed the validation. Then the next one is you need to submit a monitoring report. Okay, and the key component of this is you need to, as you said, we have to collect the data. We need to do some sampling. It's not like collecting from the entire population. We need to have equal distribution. Then there is certain monitoring frequency, like at how much interval you want to go monitor this data. Some data can be monitored daily, some data don't need to be monitored daily. We need to also take care of the right quality assurance practices, okay, during the monitoring period. And then we have certain formulas. We need to do the emission reduction calculation. Also the leakage assessment we have to do. The current project which I'm going to show, it has almost zero leakage, but then leakage is also one of the things we have to take into account. And then the performance of this cooking stove devices, the equipments may result in some emission. We need to also account for that. And that's how the key components look like. Okay, so now I'll give you, but let's give an example. What are the things? So first thing is number of project technologies in operation. We need to monitor. So for each device, there can be some emission. We need to account for that. Then the efficiency of, so efficiency means, let's say some equipment needs more electricity, some equipments needs the conventional electricity. And then that's where some carbon emissions are happening. So you need to count for that. The fuel consumption pattern also that has to be done. The usage rate. You do sometimes some kind of survey to the various households during the monitoring phase, and they will give you and you can get an approximate rate of the usage rate, and of course the non-renewable biomass fraction. So these are some of the things we do. And then as I said, we need to do a baseline scenario survey. This is nothing but we need to do this survey to establish the pre-project conditions. So here we will try to see the household characteristics in that particular region, the baseline fuel consumption pattern, the type of baseline technologies used, and also the seasonal variation, the time series variation in the fuel use. And are there any socio-economic indicators? Okay, so these things are very important because when you apply this methodology in different region would have different characteristics because people may have different habits. Maybe the heat, the weather is different. So a lot of climatic conditions are different. So every of these parameter would be different. So we need to do a survey initially to establish these pre-project conditions. And apart from that, we should have also some the sampling, how we are going to sample. There has to be some standard, and this will be given by the methodology we have to follow, and also for the quality assurance and the quality control, which is very important. And also when you're reporting this to the validators, they would actually scrutinize this very deeply. Okay, so now, as you said, sorry, I didn't get the image here. Now what I explained to you is the general baseline scenario and the monitoring scenario for this methodology. But right now we are going to show you a real project, and then let's do some of the calculations. So here, this project we took in a country called Zimbabwe, based on the inspiration that this methodology is very much adaptable in this kind of countries, especially in the Central Africa region. So the goal of this project is to distribute improved cook stoves to households in Zimbabwe. The African Stove Company, they are actually the coordinating and managing entity and the sole implementer of this voluntary project activity. And we around 48,500 roughly this many cook stoves have been distributed during the monitoring period. Okay, why we are showing this is these are some of the details you have to give during your monitoring report. And the thing is, and the validators are going to first validate before they actually visit on site. And this is implemented across Zimbabwe, not limited to any specific province. Why this is important also because when you do a baseline survey, you need to actually consider different household habits and get an approximate for that. So that's why this was across Zimbabwe and not across any specific provinces. And then you have certain crediting period for this when we consider around 5 years, and this is renewable twice. Okay. So once we have the certain as I covered certain important details is nothing but this are some kind of wood fuel cook stoves, and distributed started on this particular date, and then total of this much cook stoves are distributed, and then the funding was also supplied by the private sector with no public finance. Okay, so now let's talk about as I said you some of the data and parameters which we are going to consider. And this is at the at the renewal of the crediting period. So first thing is we want to monitor the quantity of fuel consumed in the baseline scenario in tons. Okay, similarly the CO2 emission and the non-CO2 emission factor from use of certain fuel type, this is in the baseline scenario. Okay, however, once you have in the baseline scenario, you also need to monitor this in the project scenario. Okay. Now, apart from this, the fuel quantity of fuel and the CO2 and non-CO2 emission factor, then certain things which you want to also have is with yourself is the net calorific value of the fuel type in the baseline, also in the project scenario. Okay, and the fraction of biomass used in the baseline scenario. And how much can be established as non-renewable biomass. This fraction we need to also count. Okay, so this is one of the parameters. Let's look at the next set of parameters. Sorry. Yeah, okay. Okay, so now this I just want to show you is that these are the same parameters, but I just want to show you is that sometimes the source of data, for some of the source of data, you need to do some kind of testing from your side. Okay, one of the tests is called baseline kitchen performance test, which I'm going to give you a bit what exactly is this. But for some of the data, you need to get it from very accreditable sources, maybe some government registry websites or some public agencies website. Okay, that is also one of the things. And few things you can measure yourself. Okay, so these are some of the values we by default you consider. Okay, these are some of the values. Okay, now one thing I want to tell you is that every methodology, let's say you implement, you also need to take into account the effect of the sustainability development goals, SDG impact, And SDG impact is also very important to be considered. So in this project, let's there was like the sustainability development goal of 1, 3, 5, 7, 13. Around these goals are achieved. So for that, why I'm showing here is you need to also consider the impact individually. Okay, so that is one of the things you have to do. Okay, so let's go to the next. Now, the one so the previously the one I showed you something we have to have by default, but something we have to monitor by ourselves is nothing but mostly everything in the project scenario, because that is where the validators will also review. So the quantity of fuel consumed, the usage rate, the technologies we have used, the leakage, and the proportion of people living in household with access to basic services, the air quality, and the time saving, and then the number of households and institutions they have access to the affordable, reliable, and modern energy services, quantitative employment and income generation, and the reduction in domestic fuel consumption. All of these are actually important because they'll play a very important role in, especially for the sustainability development goal impact, SDG impact calculation, and also on the baseline emission and the project emission. Okay, so similarly, that's how we do some kind of field performance test, and this is during, especially during the monitoring period, where you are going to actually measure each of these metrics. Okay, so now I used a word called as baseline kitchen performance test. So the baseline kitchen performance test will be considered. This generally we do in the monitoring period to determine the average you would use for household per annum in the pre-project scenario. Okay, so it's nothing but you weigh the wood fuel consumed by non-project household over 4 consecutive days, and this is like some kind of preliminary test you do. Similarly, during the project scenario, we do something called as project scenario. We do something called as project kitchen performance test. Even this is also during measuring the same metric like here. Now this is also during about 4 consecutive days. And this can give you some level of estimation to your calculations, one in the baseline scenario and one in the project scenario. Okay, so now, so what we discussed so far is the overall standards and the overall factors we have to consider and the different aspects of the different methodology. Okay, one is the baseline methodology and the monitoring methodology. So now we're going to calculate the final baseline emission. So we have the data with us, and now we need to calculate the baseline emission. So how we do is you first calculate the leakage, okay? And then once you calculate the leakage, you also consider nothing but the specific carbon dioxide emission and the non-CO2 emissions by using this individual technology or the devices, okay? And then you add it and you multiply that with your cumulative usage rate, okay? And then overall, then you need to multiply this on the number of project days included in your project scenario, okay? And then you sum it over multiple cycles, okay? And then you calculate this part, and then you subtract the leakage, and that would give you the baseline emission. So next would be, once you have the baseline emission, after the monitoring period, you need to calculate the project emission. Project emission will be derived from something called as the emission reduction, okay? Once you have the emission, so how do you calculate the emission reduction? Is nothing but you get this some kind of baseline emission, right? And then you do the baseline emission from the baseline scenario. So you have multiple cycles. You take the summation of it. Similarly, the project emission, you have over multiple cycles, take the summation of it, and then you have the leakage, and you get the emission reduction is nothing but you take this equation, you take the baseline emission, you subtract the project emission and the leakage, and now you get the emission overall reduction. Now once you have that, then you take that, and then from there you actually submit this, you kind of deduct that from also from the overall baseline emission, and then you get something called as the project emission. So you also take the summation of the leakage, and then you calculate this equation, use this equation to calculate your project emission. So overall, the main three calculations to be done are, one is the baseline emission, one is the project emission, and the leakage emission. However, note that because for this methodology, we almost had zero leakage emission. The reason is being because of the high quality of and the replacement of this technology, basically the cookstove devices on very systematic period of time. So it was almost zero. Okay. Now here, so as I said, you SDG 1, 3, 5, 7, 8, 12, 13. So each of them are actually, this project is satisfying each of the sustainability development goals. Hence, you use this formula, which I actually showed you. Let me show you the same thing here. Use this formula. And so this is over all the couples, like the cookstoves we've used, only 48,000. And then over total technology days, you multiply that over total technology days, how much is the usage rate? Is 90%. Okay. And then this is nothing but your non-CO2 and CO2 emission. Okay. And basically you do this, and then you sum it up, and then there is no leakage. And that's how you calculate the baseline emission. Okay. So similarly, then what you do is you calculate the emission reduction. Okay. This is very important, the emission reduction, because once you have the emission reduction, you also get the project emission. Okay, so these are some of the calculations we have done. However, right now in our, we actually have an Excel sheet here, and we use this to, so this is actually right now we do in the front end of our global climate registry. One of the remark we want to make here is, right now we do this in the front end of the registry, which our users can directly leverage, because they actually face the front end. Most of the users who come from the sustainability background, they may not actually be very proficient in the Guardian. So as a starting point, we implemented this automatic for methodology. We implemented this Excel calculations to immediately make it very efficient, and then on the front end. But then what we're going to do is right now is that we are also implementing the backend in the next coming release on the hedera side, so that it is also from the Guardian perspective, everything is done automatically, the calculations part, which my teammate will also explain to you. Okay, so right now we have this. So now I invite my teammate Saharsh. He will take you through the Guardian aspect, and he'll explain you also the overall methodology, architecture, the policy architecture, and then give a real end-to-end execution of starting from project registration till issue of the credits. Okay, Sarge, the floor is yours now.
Yeah, hello everyone. So let me share screen and I can show you the
share. I
policy.
can. Mhm. You want to share the screen, or I will do?
I'll share screen.
Okay. You have the presentation, right?
Yeah. Okay, share screen here. So this is the Guardian platform that we are hosting separately, and then this is the TPDD TEC policy that we have created. So basically using all of the components from the panel here and creating a basic workflow of what we want in the policy and everything. So you will see there are three major stakeholders for this methodology. It's going to be the registry, it's going to be the project developer, and the verifier. So verifier is the auditor of the project, and there is configuration of each of the basically the flow of project developers, so coming in and registering and then going through each of the steps. And similarly for verifier as well, there are bunch of steps which we'll see in the run of the policy now. So wanted to mention that we use this policy currently as we have built the global climate registry on top of Guardian. So we use this policy directly on this platform, which is the global climate registry. So if you see the task cleaning project of Zimbabwe that Tattva was talking about, it is listed here. And this is on the hedera mainnet blockchain. So it's a real project. So if we see a bunch of projects here, we can see the task project here. But first, let's go through the run of the policy, how the policy actually works. So I'm going to dry run this because we're using this for test purpose for now, which is perfect for the demo. So once it reaches the dry run stage, I'll be creating 3 users. One is going to be the registry admin, one is going to be the project developer, and there will be the auditor. And then I will be switching screens between all 3 stakeholders and just to see what they see on their screens when they are working with the policy. So I am currently on the administrator screen, which is the registry admin, and I'll be creating 2 users. So you see here, virtual user 1, virtual user 2. And first one, I want it to be, let's say, the project developer. So they will first be asked to choose the role that they want to play in the methodology. So first I'll choose project developer, and then it will ask me to fulfill some of the details of the project developer in order for registry to verify it. So details such as the header account of the project developer, the contact details, their website of the company, their email, official email, etc. So I'm going to fill in the test data here and just create. And this will make this user give the role of project developer to this user. Now once they are the project developer, they can create the project and start the workflow from there on. Let me just create the auditor account as well simultaneously. So I will be selecting the VVB, and then similar details I will need to fill for auditor as well in order for confirmation. So same things, I'm going to fill the test data and create. All right. So currently they have not been assigned to any project or any other document that they need to review. So you see an empty screen here. Now let's start the project workflow under this policy. So first, the project developer is going to fill a project listing application. This is basically an initial requirement of the project where you just fill in the basic details of the project, the description of the project, name of the project, what is the location, what is the crediting period for which you want this project to run, what is the scale, what is the type of the project, all of these details. I'm going to fill in the test data for now and click on create. This will create an entry for the project listing application. Once the project is listed, and just for now, we're gonna release the approval part, like at each step to be required registry to approve this project. We're gonna be releasing in the next version that we have for this digitized methodology. So let's say the registry approves it, which is currently done on the front end side, and then they can submit the project design document. Now, this is what Tattva was talking about, the baseline methodology. So this is going to be the pre-project details that you're going to fill in, details about the overall design of what you will be implementing after this is approved. So here there will be calculations of basically calculations of how much you estimate the emission reductions. So the estimation, this will all be estimation and the overall design of the project. I'm going to fill in the test requirements, and this estimation needs to be approved by an experienced entity. So which is going to be the validator and the verification body, which have expertise in the domain. So so project developer will be assigning the VVB of its choice from which VVB they want the approval. So here in the assign block, there is a drop-down menu which will basically show all of the names of the VVB. Since we created only one user which has the VVB role, it is showing that VVB to us. But ideally, there will be a lot of VVBs onboarded onto the platform, and the project developer can choose the one that they have talked to, maybe offsite, or maybe the one they like, or they can choose a reputed VVB. So let me go ahead with the VVB that I have created. And once this is done, I can go to the VVB and they will be able to see the project information. So they will be able to see all of the details of who is the issuer by the dates, what is the date of the issuance, what are the form, basically the whole form of the PDD that is submitted by the user. And after reviewing, if they approve, they can create a validation report against it. So this is a report which basically confirms to the registry, to the project developer, that the PDD looks good. And if there are any comments, then they can drop in here as well. So it will again have just basic details about what are the standard baselines applied during this PDD, whether the emission reduction estimations are correct or near what is actually estimated. So I'm going to fill in the test data here. And this is the completion of validation report. After that, I'll just simply assign it back to that project developer. And then at this step, the PDD is approved. So after the approval of PDD, ideally the project developer will go in and start the project on ground. They will be implementing the project and then getting all of the readings from for example, if it's a cook stove, they will be accumulating all of the different types of readings and then filling in a monitoring report. So this is what a monitoring report is, which is going to be post project or in the middle of the project. So there can be ideally multiple monitoring reports. And against this monitoring report, you will be issued carbon credits. So Here, there'll be details of the calculations of the baseline emission, the project emissions, the leakage, everything is going to be here. And then let's fill the test data for now. Again, after the MR is filled, it's submitted, there is a status of pending approval where the VVB again will be verifying it. So here we have provided again with a drop-down menu to provide basically project developers with the flexibility to choose a different validator if they wish to. So currently I still have one, so I'm going to go with the same validator. They can even stick to the same validator that they used for the project design document. And again, the same process. So they're gonna here submit a verification report against the monitoring report. So this is the verification report claiming that the monitoring report is good. And then the verification report itself will have an estimated amount of the emission reductions that they propose according to after reviewing the monitoring report. And this will be proposed to the registry admin itself, and they'll be having a look of the verification report. So let me fill in the test data. So yeah, there will be a bunch of different fields, and I will say create. Okay, assign it back to the project developer. And now this form directly goes to the registry admin. So from here on, once the MR is approved, after approval of the MR, there will be the minting of credits. So the minting is done by the registry admin. They will be looking at the verification report submitted and they will analyze it. If they feel the estimation is correct or the amount suggested by the VVB for credit issuance is correct, they can go ahead and do the final submission of just the final amount to be minted to the project developer. So let's say I will mint 2 credits, for example, and create, and this will start the process of minting and then transferring the credits from the registry account, registry hedera account to the project developer's hedera account. So if I go, let's say, to the token history, you will see the entry of the transaction hash, the date of minting, what is the token ID, and you can view a trust chain. So the trust chain is basically from start to end, the deployment of project from this very start of creation of the methodology to submission of project developer application, VVB application, and all the way till the end, which is the minting of the tokens. So you can see all of the details. You can see the VP file of the amount of mint and the issuer and the proof of the issuance or proof of the transaction as well. So this is the overall flow. And I would say there are a bunch of improvements that we need to do to this policy in the next version. One is to include the calculations, which is automatically done on the Guardian side in the policy. Currently, we do it on the front end side. And the other is to add in the security checks or maybe approvals by the registry admin at each step. So I would say that's it for the demo. And I would want to show how after the minting, because the minting is done here, and this minting is done of non-fungible tokens. So each fungible token, I would say each non-fungible token is 1 carbon ton. So for example, I want to show one project on our global climate registry, which has been listed. So this is a safe water project implemented in Rwanda, Africa. And here you will see this project has completed the whole process that I showed you in the on ground, and they have been minted with 100 tons of credits. So 100 tons of carbon credits, you can see the details of methodology, the ledger works, which basically shows the policy. So this is the policy topic, and it will have all of the transaction messages. So it's clearly transparent. And then just wanted to show the token of this. So as I said, 100 tons, which means each ton will be an NFT. So here you see 100 NFTs that have been minted to the project developer account. Just if I go into the NFT, this is what I can see. So I can see all of the metadata. So from step 1 until the last step. So you can see first, let's say transaction is the token mint to the registry admin, then transferred from registry admin to the project developer account. And here you see all of the metadata of all of the details that have been submitted by any of the stakeholders throughout the project cycle. So from verification report to monitoring report to all the way till project developer, VVB application, project listing application. So all of the metadata is present, so completely available on the blockchain for anyone to just come and view and verify if it's a genuine project. So that's it from my end for the demo.
Thank you, Tatwa and Saharsh, for this very informative presentation. All right, thank you all for joining, and thank you for the guest from CarbonBase for today's presentation, and I hope to see you all here next month for our next webinar.